All right, gentlemen. It's a big day in the first round. And we all know that because we're grown men. And we cover sports in the first round. But today's a bigger day for a much bigger reason. We're doing this show today for all those hardworking men out there watching the show. They might be sitting around their computers this morning with their coffee, hoping, thinking, I hope the first round is good today. Because today they're sitting there with their sons, little Johnny and little Timmy. And Johnny and Timmy are watching the first round for the very first time this morning. And that's why we've got to be on our game. We got to be our best. And I know you can do it. Better yet, you gotta do it. So the motto for today is we're going out on a limb. We're going out on a limb for all those dads out there watching the show with their sons for the first time. For all those plumbers and metal workers and cops, first responders. That's why we're going to give our best. We're going to go out on a limb today in the first round. It's too easy to stay right close to the tree and hold on for dear life. We're going to take a risk today, men. We're going out on a limb with our predictions. We're going out on our limb with our opinions. Because that's where the fruit is. It's out on the limb. Oh yeah, it's hard to get out on the limb. We all know that. We're grown men. But that's what we're going to do because they're counting on us today. We're not going to give them an average show. They can find that all over YouTube. No, we're going to be our best. We're going to climb to the top of that mountain today. Are you with me? I know you are. And you got to be with me. Now let's start the show. Camera.
Chris Roberts. And now, here's the first round. You're tuned in to the hottest sports analysis of the week with your hosts Ron Dolbeck and Chris Roberts. And now, here's the first round.
In the first round, we welcome you in live on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. And this is an awesome time of the year because there's so much going on in the world of sports. I don't even know if we can cover it all, but let's get it started right now with the biggest stories, starting with college football. Yesterday, Alabama goes on the road to Mississippi State. They take care of what they needed to take care of, but that's not the story. For some reason, in the second quarter, Alabama's up 35-7. Nick Saban leaving Tua Tagovailoa, knowing he's had problems with ankles for the past 2 years, left him in the game. He gets hurt. Hip stinger, out for the rest of the season. It could be a dislocation. My question is, why was Tua in that game? Other scores to cover from yesterday's action. Number 10, Oklahoma goes on the road to 13 Baylor. Gets it done 34-31. This was a great game. A lot of scoring. The star of the show, I thought, was Jalen Hurts. Chris and I are going to talk about that. Number 8, Minnesota's been rowing the boat all year. Yesterday, the boat sunk in Iowa. Iowa goes and takes care of Minnesota 23-19. Tanner Morgan goes for 368 yards and a touchdown, but it's not enough. Good home victory for Iowa. Georgia goes on the road to Auburn, gets a big victory, 21-14. The story here, Georgia wins the SEC East. They'll be playing in Atlanta, probably against LSU. Other big stories going on in college football. LSU, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida, Penn State all get big wins yesterday and keep their hopes alive for New Year's Day games. The story that nobody is talking about, I don't think, is Oregon and Utah, both out of the Pac-10, get big wins yesterday. They're on a collision course to play for the Pac-12 title. One of them could get in the playoffs. That's the big question mark right now. Chris and I will break that down. NFL news. Colin Kaepernick ditches the NFL workout, goes to a high school about an hour away, does about 40 minutes of working out in front of 250 spectators, 8 teams, and several agents. I think that from all the reports, he did a great job. His arm's in shape. He looked like he was ready to start right now. This seemed a little staged to me. Chris and I both have strong opinions because it's a go out on your limb Sunday. We're going to get into that more. Myles Garrett uses a helmet from Mason Rudolph like a samurai sword to go upside his dome. He's out for the rest of the season. This is one of the most gross, despicable things I've seen not only in NFL but in sports in my 40 years of watching sports. We're going to talk about the ramifications of that. Big games in the NFL. New England goes on the road to Philly. Philly's getting 4. Houston going on the road to Baltimore. Baltimore laying 4.5. That's an exciting game that I'm looking to see how those two quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson, perform. The Cardinals going on the road to the 49ers. This is a big bounce-back game for San Francisco. They're laying 9.5 points against the Cardinals team that's been fairly stout for only having 3 wins. They're doing a lot more than a lot of people expected. A game that's absolutely shocking to me is the Chicago Bears are going on the road to the Rams. The Bears are 4-5, getting 6 points on the road, and the Rams are 5-4. Last year at the end of the season, the Rams are in the Super Bowl and the Bears made the playoffs. Both of them looked like they were on trajectories going in the right direction. What has happened in the last year to those two franchises? Let's talk about our Heisman votes right now. Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa. How do you have it breaking down? Chris and I are going to go over our top 3 and 4 for the Heisman. Also, college football rankings. After everything that shook down yesterday, how does your top 10 look? We'll be talking about our top 10s and see how they look compared to the college football playoff rankings from last week. Major League Baseball, Mets want to re-sign Noah Syndergaard. That's going to cost more than a pretty penny. Yanks in talks with shortstop Didi Gregorius. He's going to want them to back up the truck and pay him big time because this is the money contract for Didi. We'll get into that. NBA news. Paul George comes back for the Clippers yesterday. They beat Atlanta 150-101. The real story is Paul George in 20 minutes goes for 37 points in an awesome show. I think that they're the team to stop in the Western Conference. Houston takes care of Minnesota 125-105. The story in this one, James Harden scores 49 points, which is extremely easy to do when you take 41 shots in a game. Thanks, James. Other stories in the NBA, Celtics lose their season opener and then go on a 10-win streak. They're 10-1 right now. What's amazing about this is the Knicks, Pelicans, Warriors, and Wizards combined don't even have 10 wins. Something's going on with that. We expect the Knicks to be bad, but the Pelicans and Wizards with 3 wins each, that's crazy. MMA and boxing talk. Tyson Fury says that he's open to a crossover fight with UFC heavyweight champ Stipe Miocic. This would be a boxing match, not an MMA match. I would love to see that. I might even buy the pay-per-view to see that fight because I want to see a heavyweight MMA fighter get in there and box against Tyson Fury. My interest level for that is big. And lastly, in boxing, next week, Deontay Wilder, the Bronze Bomber, goes up against Luis Ortiz in Las Vegas. This was a very entertaining first fight. This is a rematch from last year. I'm interested in that. December 14th, if you're a fan of boxing and the sweet science of it, Terrence Crawford will be fighting in New York City against a guy that I can't even pronounce his name. Go Google it. And December 7th, a rematch between Andy Ruiz Jr. and Anthony Joshua. It's in Saudi Arabia for some reason instead of in England. And I haven't heard anything about the promotion for this fight, and I'm wondering why. Having said all that, it's time to welcome in my co-host here, Chris. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, man.
You're looking. Did you get a haircut?
Yeah, man, I had to, man.
I haven't gotten a haircut, but I'm losing my hair, and it doesn't grow that incredibly fast. The big story yesterday in college football. We want to start with that?
Yeah, we can start with that.
Tua Tagovailoa, why is he playing in the game up 35-7 in the second quarter? And then it seemed like a safety gap comment from Nick Saban saying, well, this was going to be his last series. But I'm asking, why was he even in there risking the rest of your season when you're in the midst of trying to make the playoffs?
Well, that's the question that everybody's asking. I was looking at that game too. When I saw the injury, it was something serious. I mean, to see Tua actually screaming out in pain, It lets you know just how serious that injury was, and it kind of makes you think, what are you doing in that situation now?
Well, I think they have a solid backup, but it's hard to say that they're not going to lose too much because Tua's not there. Because out of all of the college football players, offensive, defensive, and otherwise, I would put Tua in my top 5 as far as ability, talent, and character.
Right.
I just think he's a solid character guy. You know me. I love team and I love character, and he plays a team mentality. He doesn't worry about himself or, accolades or shining the light on himself. And he's a character guy. Plus, he's talented.
Right.
Beyond human recognition. He's an awesomely talented guy. So what do you think this means for Alabama moving forward?
Well, I mean, to me, it knocks them down another notch, because without having Tua there going up against an Auburn team at the end of the season, it's really going to make it tough on their second string quarterback. I mean, when you look at that second string quarterback, I mean, after Tua went out, Bama only scored another field goal. It was at 38 to 7 was the final score.
Yeah, I think that they went into load management.
Right. So the fact that they only scored like 3 points with Tua going out, it begs the question, how is that offense gonna fare when they go against a quality opponent?
I think that they're still going to be a force. I still think that they're one of the upper echelon dominant teams in college football. I don't think that they drop off too much, and that's not a slight against. I just think that they have so much talent. It's not a slight against Tua. I just think that they have so much talent on that team that they're not going to miss a big, huge step because Tua's not out there, even though, he's in my top 5 of Heisman players.
Yeah.
And, they have a tune-up game next week, which I think obviously will be really good for them. But in terms of a major step back, I just don't see that happening. Do you? They've got Auburn at the end of the year, which is a road game.
Right.
And I don't know how. I think bringing Mac Jones in, he's 6'2". He's kind of proven himself when he played earlier against the Razorbacks this year. But that was Arkansas, so we really don't know what we're getting. But on the other side of the fence, I could argue, well, Auburn doesn't know what they're getting because there's no real film on Mac Jones. I think that they finish out, obviously, against a free spot on the bingo board next week. They'll get a win at home against a directional school. But I think that they take care of Auburn. And then what matters is what happens with the other teams in the top 10.
Right. Yeah. So when I look at this, I mean, looking at Alabama is still a top 10 team, but it just without Tua, those intangibles, whether with him moving down the field, making check downs or whatnot, it they keep him in there, but it still drops them down like a notch to me, simply because
you lose the experience.
Because you lose the experience and you lose exactly
leadership
and exactly what Tua is able to do for that offense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it's a major step back, but it's definitely a point of concern. Yesterday, number 10 Oklahoma goes on the road to Baylor. College game day was there. This was actually a very entertaining game, an exciting game, a well-played game.
Yeah.
And Baylor comes out like a cannonball and goes up 21-10 going into halftime, or 31-10, I'm sorry, going into halftime. And then it just seemed that the energy level, it's like they had an endorphin rush in the first half, but then Jalen Hurts just kind of took over, and I think he was the story of the game. He goes 30 for 42 for 4 touchdowns. What's new there? I mean, that's pretty awesome. Against a good Baylor defense, they end up getting the win 34-31 in the last minute of the game. Oklahoma's a solid top 10 team, and their defense is, even though they gave up 31 points, I think their defense is I don't want to use the term, they're kind of getting it, but this is a good time to start getting it and gelling and getting the cohesiveness together. I like the direction they're going in.
I like the direction they're going in, but the situation now with the Big 12 is now it's like too little too late for Oklahoma. When you start to look at some of those other teams that are ahead of them, yes, they'll move up in the polls, but I think the Big 12, unfortunately, because of this, because Baylor lost that game yesterday, they, in a sense, kind of kicked themselves out of the playoff hunt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though Oklahoma's defense is finally starting to get it, I think it's too little too late.
I think it'll be an interesting matchup, whatever, New Year's Bowl Game 6 that they go to. I think that it'll be a great matchup, maybe against a Pac-10 team. I mean, who knows? I just think that they're eye test is becoming better and better as we get deeper in the season. And I like that. Minnesota yesterday getting 3 points. And everybody looked at it and was like, why is Minnesota? I'm taking this. And a good friend of ours in Nebraska took the 3 points, didn't he?
Yeah.
That didn't work out too good because Iowa gets the win 23-19 and takes home the Floyd of Rose. What is it? Floyd of. It's not Roseville, is it? The trophy, the big pig?
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, they've beaten him 5 times in a row either way. Minnesota quarterback Tanner Morgan goes for 368 yards and a touchdown. Their number one wide receiver goes for 170 yards, and they still can't get it done. Right. It seemed like they weren't ready when they came out. They weren't rowing the boat. They were sitting there waiting for P.J. Fleck or somebody else to row the boat the whole first half. They go into halftime with only 6 points, and then it's like they turned it on, but it was a little too late.
Right.
Yeah.
So going against a Kirk Ferentz team who is a very defensive-minded team, you have to come out gunning. If you allow this team to stay in there, you're going to get exactly what they got yesterday, which is a game that was close. It was something that the way Iowa plays football, it was physical, and they ended up losing that game.
Yeah, and Iowa's offense actually showed up against a pretty good Minnesota defense. They've been ranked in the top 15 defensively nationwide all season. And you know what I say? I say 2 thumbs up to Kurt Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes getting a solid win at home. Let's go down to Auburn yesterday. Jordan-Hare Stadium, number 4, Georgia, 21-14 victory. They seal up the SEC East and be playing in the title game. This was a very lackluster game on both sides of the ball for both teams, I think. And it really showed that Auburn's offense is just not there yet.
Right.
And I know they have a young quarterback, but if I'm a booster and I'm a fan, I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm concerned too. Looking at that game yesterday. Of course, sitting in the barbershop, you have nothing else to do but watch football. So as I'm sitting there looking at that game yesterday, it was so boring. Georgia scored, and then it's like they go a whole other quarter and a half and don't score again.
Yep.
It was a defensive-minded game. It was close. It seemed like a drawn out game.
It was like watching molasses come down a wall very slowly with
just like,
not a lot of fans.
It's like watching paint dry.
It was not an exciting game, and this sets up probably LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship game. You know, I don't know what to think about this. I don't want to say that LSU is just going to whitewall them because LSU's defense is a little bit suspect in my opinion. I think they're like a top 30 to 40 defense, not a lights out defense. I mean, they gave up 38 points to Vandy for crying out loud.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a huge test for Kirby Smart. But offensively, they have got to get it going. I mean, Jake Fromm, I don't want to be critical, but Jake Fromm isn't exactly having a blowout, lights out year that I would have expected him. I was really high on 2 teams coming into the season. Georgia was one of them, and the other one was Texas. And we'll get to Texas in a minute. But, you know, Jake Fromm, I think this is a time where he's really got to step up and shine if they've got a chance to win.
Right.
We know that they have an offensive line. We know they have a solid defense. But at quarterback, I would give him a B+ on the season. He needs to have an A+ game going up against LSU. I think it's going to be a shootout type game if Georgia's going to win. And they're going to have to score a lot of points and kind of keep up with LSU.
Yeah, they're going to have to try to do something. I mean, it was crazy watching that game yesterday where the commentator says, if Georgia scores this touchdown to go up 14 points, it's going to be tough for Auburn to come back. And that's something that you're not used to seeing from a Gus Malzahn's team simply because he's an offensive-minded coach who likes to go fast and put up points. Yeah. So the fact that if Georgia scored 14 points, it was almost guaranteed that Auburn was going to lose, it kind of
took the air out of your sails.
Took the air out of your sails.
And how many times did Auburn get over the 50-yard line and then they weren't able to capitalize?
Exactly.
They just stalled out.
Exactly.
It's just disappointing. I mean, hopefully next year, you know, they're going to lose 2 of their defensive linemen who are absolute studs.
Yeah.
But hopefully next year, if they can keep that defense intact and the offense catches up, they could be a juggernaut next year. LSU, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida, Penn State all get big victories yesterday. Clemson just looks really impressive to me. Ohio State played Rutgers. I mean, that was just a scrimmage game. LSU gets it done on the road at Ole Miss. Nothing too impressive there. Oregon and Utah. Utah played at home against UCLA. Again, not really tough competition. Right. And Oregon gets it done. at against Arizona, but I'm really looking forward to the Oregon matchup with Utah. We talk about whether games are awesome or not. They don't always have to be a 1 versus 2 or a 2 versus 5 team, top 10 team to be awesome. I think that evenly matched teams make up good matchups, make up good games, and that's what we're going to get with Oregon versus Utah in the Pac-12 championship game.
I think so too. And if I'm Oregon and I'm Utah, I'm rooting for both of them to win, both teams to win out, simply because that championship game has playoff implications written all over that game, that championship game. So if I'm Utah, I'm a Duck fan. If I'm a Ute, if I'm Utah, I'm a Duck fan. If I'm a Duck, I'm definitely a Ute fan right now. Hoping that both of these teams stay, go undefeated these last 2 games.
Yeah, Mario Cristobal at Oregon.
Yes.
Awesome job.
Yes.
I mean, he has just turned that around. And when we're talking about that matchup, both teams have a great offenses. Both teams have great defenses.
Yes.
That's what's going to make this so interesting to see. We were talking about our Heisman picks. Right now, I've got it Joe Burrow number 1, Justin Fields number 2. Then I've got Jalen Hurts and then Tua. And the margin between Jalen Hurts and Tua, you could flip-flop them as far as I'm concerned. Here's one thing. Nobody's really talking about Justin Fields anymore. The first couple games, he had breakout games, especially against, the primetime game at Nebraska. And we started hearing about Heisman talk, but then it kind of faded away. He's got 2,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He's also ran for 377 yards and 4 more touchdowns. So when we talk in the NFL, the next level up, 2-to-1 ratio at touchdowns to interceptions is really good. 3-to-1 is great. 4-to-1 is even better. 31-to-1. How about that? And no one's talking about Justin Fields.
Yeah, well, those are like my top 3 too. Where
You got Burrow 1.
I have Burrow 1. Yes.
And then what?
I have Burrow 1. I have Jalen Hurts 2.
Okay.
I have Justin Fields 3. And simply because Tua is not going to play anymore this season, I moved up Justin Herbert from Oregon to 4.
Okay.
Simply because what people don't understand is just how efficient this guy has been this season. This guy threw 28 touchdowns, only had 2 interceptions, and until last night, he threw his first interception in the second half last night. So just think about that. Going to the second half of the game down the stretch when you need your quarterback to be efficient, to put up points, to not turn the ball over. I mean, he's been able to do that all season. So the fact that he threw his first interception in the second half shows you that this guy is capable of leading you down the stretch when you need him to be the clutch quarterback.
Yeah, most of the season I've had Jonathan Taylor up until 2 weeks ago as my number 1 Heisman contender, and I think that was a valid pick. Right. Yesterday he goes 25 carries for 204 yards. That's pretty amazing. That was the 11th time he's gone for over 200 yards rushing.
Right.
I definitely think he's the number 1 running back, but as far as being in the top 5 anymore, he might be 5, but I can't argue with Justin Herbert being at 5 either. Let's go to our top 10 rankings right now after yesterday's shakedown. I've got LSU number 1, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia solidly at 4. I had them at 5 last week, going on the road and beating a solid Auburn team. They move up for me. They're at 4. Bama's at 5 for me. Oklahoma, they're ranked 10th. I've got them at 6 now. Solid win on the road. It's a conference win and against a top team, top 15 team. Then I've got Oregon, Utah, Florida, and Penn State is barely hanging on to my top 10 because the last 2 weeks, they lose last week on the road to a pretty good Minnesota team that came back to earth this week. And then yesterday, they just didn't look really good against Indiana. I know Indiana's a C-plus team, but you're at home, and that's the kind of game that you need to get up really early and just blow them out. And they kept them hanging around even until 13 seconds left in the game with an onside kick. Indiana was still in that game. So as far as my top 10 goes, I've got Penn State at 10, but they're barely hanging on there, and they can be replaced by a slight blow of the wind at any point.
Exactly.
So how does your top 10 look?
Top 10, the same for LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. I actually moved Oregon up over Alabama simply because of the Tua situation.
Right.
So I have Bama at 6. I have Utah at 7. I have Oklahoma at 8. At 9, I have Penn State, and I have Florida at 10.
Yeah, I really can't argue with that. I've got Florida at 9 instead of 10 with Penn State just because of the strength of schedule. They've actually played a tougher schedule. But there's two ways to look at how we want to rank these teams, and I know there's a lot of criteria for the College Football Playoff Committee. But you can look at the body of work, you can look at what they've done recently, or if you're trying to decide between a number 5 team and a number 4 team and who deserves to be in that last slot, I think to myself, if they played 10 times on a neutral field or even 1 time on a neutral field, who would win? So you're talking about Bama and Oregon being very close for you at 5 and 6, and Bama's your 6. And I think if they were on a neutral field, that'd be a hell of a game, wouldn't it?
It would.
You know, I can't see one of those. It could be a 5-5, you know, if they played 10 times. But I could see either team, you know, winning 6 of those.
Right.
But I can't see either team winning 7 out of 10.
Right, no.
But I think that would be – what if we get that matchup? Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would
Bama against Oregon?
I know. And we really see just how good this Oregon defense really is.
Yeah.
You're looking at those wide receivers.
All those wide receivers. So, moving on to the NFL, Colin Kaepernick had his workout day yesterday. So, the NFL scheduled a workout for him. They allowed him to bring some of his own wide receivers. They provided 3 wide receivers themselves. They had him playing in Atlanta at the Atlanta Falcons practice facility, which, okay, that's a nice gesture. But, you know, I really don't know what to think of all this because about 2 hours before the game, Colin and his staff moved the game about an hour away to a high school just outside of Atlanta, and they had their workout there, which by all reports, he had a great workout, strong arm, upper physical body strength. All the reports about what he actually did in the workout were all positive. Why the NFL didn't want this to be recorded or have it covered in any way by video footage, I don't understand that. Why he moved it at the last minute, knowing beforehand that they were going to have that rule in place, I don't understand that. This just seems like a big drama mess, and there was a lot more professional way on both sides of handling this. But the bottom line is, he seems, by all accounts, to be able to play in the NFL still, and I hope he gets a chance. But let's talk about the mess and the drama of actually what happened just to get him to work out. I mean, it just seems kind of like 2 high school kids fighting over something petty, don't you think? I mean, it's a guy's career, and that's not petty, but the way they handled it, both sides, I think was kind of petty. Why does the NFL care if it's videotaped? Why do they care if there's 50 representatives there or 5? Why agree to certain terms and then not go to that facility and move it? That kind of seemed like drama at the end of the day. I don't know, Chris. What's your take on all this?
Well, my take is the NFL comes out looking like the villain again as more information begins to trickle out about this whole situation. Mm-hmm. There was a situation that came up that the NFL reached out to Colin's representatives on Tuesday, told Colin that, hey, we want you to work out. We have certain stipulations, and you have 2 hours to make a decision. So
why do something like that?
So exactly. So why?
It doesn't seem very professional to me.
It doesn't seem professional at all.
No.
So the fact that they wanted him to sign a waiver as if he is currently under contract for an NFL team.
Right.
He's
not an NFL employee.
He's not an employee. Exactly. So the fact that you want him to sign that waiver, practice at your facility, have all these different stipulations, quite understandably, if you know Colin Kaepernick, he's going to rebel against the system in a sense. So
you would agree if he didn't like those terms, which some of them I'm going to say are ridiculous, and you would agree with me, then if you agree to that, though, you got to stick to what you agree to and work out there. If you didn't like it, don't go the whole time saying, yeah, I don't have a problem with this, and then at the last minute, 2 hours beforehand, go work out somewhere else. That's what I didn't like from his side of the camp.
Exactly.
It just seemed childish to me. It seemed like drama. And you got to rise above the drama that the NFL is creating in this situation. I think it would have shown a lot more light on his character, which I think he's a good guy. And why he's not in the league, we could go round and round and round and get conspiracy theories and race type stuff into it. I mean, God knows, and the people that are keeping him out of the league know. He might have a good idea, but there's so much involved in this now that I just boil it down to this. He seems physically able to be in the NFL. His head seems like it's in the right place. If he could get rid and let go of the fact that they've kept me out and I haven't been able to play, if he can let go of that stuff and just focus on being a quarterback, he deserves to be in the league. He's qualified enough to be in the league. And not only that, I think he would be a huge asset to whoever picks him up in the league.
I think so as well. Especially when you look at some of the quarterbacks that that the NFL has given shots to Jay Cutler.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are in the league now that we could look at and say, why is Ryan Tannehill making $68 million?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that just this whole situation, it did seem like a mess from the beginning. I mean, again, first off, why do this now? The season is halfway over now.
Yeah.
So why, in a sense, do basically a pro day at like week 10? I don't understand that. If you were going to do something like that, if you meant right, this is something you would have done over the summer, where every coach, GM, or whoever needed to be there, they could be there. They could have those evaluations for themselves.
Let me ask you this: does the NFL get any credit for setting this up and making any kind of attempt? Because they're not doing this for any other free agents. So just that right there, do we give the NFL any credit at all to reaching out and trying to facilitate some promotion of Colin Kaepernick?
I'm thinking that this is more of a safe face situation. I think a lot of this may have been with the addition of adding Jay-Z in to do some of this stuff to kind of bridge over, I guess, their racial situation that they had going on.
So maybe they're trying to reach out to the African-American community a little more?
I think so. I think because when you start to look at NFL viewership as far as African-Americans, it did drop off with this whole Colin Kaepernick situation. Mm-hmm. So I think what the NFL is trying to do is trying to get back and reach out to try to bring that viewership back because, ratings count.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's just not been handled right. I think the whole thing yesterday, it could have been handled better on both sides. And I really would have loved to see Colin Kaepernick just work out and not do the stuff he did because I want him to succeed. And I think he's a man of character. And, it doesn't go and totally tarnish it. I just think he got caught up in it. And you know what? I really shouldn't have too strong of an opinion on this because I'm not him. I haven't gone through what he's gone through, and I don't have his mindset, and he does, and he's got to make the best decisions for himself, and he has all the information, and you and I have limited information. Right. But the bottom line is I hope he lands somewhere because I like him. I think he's talented. I think he could be an asset, and it's the right thing. Yeah. Don't keep anybody out of the league, whether they're Irish, Japanese, black, white, Middle Eastern, because of stupid stuff. Right. I mean, that's dumb. Okay, so maybe he has political positions, social positions that are more aggressive than other people like. They're not in the same line of what other people like, but that doesn't matter. Right. What matters is, can you win football games? You judge a man on when you're in the NFL on your mindset mentally, and can you win games? Are you a leader of men? He seems like he is. I think he should get a shot. But the way it turned out yesterday was a bit of a mess. And speaking of a mess in the NFL, I don't even know, this has been talked about the last 3 days, ad nauseum, too much. But Myles Garrett, he took a 2x4 to the head of Mason Randolph. Yeah. And we would agree that his conduct, choices, behavior, and character are despicable. Yeah. I think he's got some issues inside his head that he really needs a psych eval, and I'll tell you why I think that. This isn't just flippant talk, because all the interviews, if you've seen with Myles Garrett, he comes off like a really soft-spoken, mild-mannered. He's into Mozart and chess and all this stuff. But then you see what actually happens when the rage is released and when you have a lack of self-control and personal integrity, which I'm not attacking his character. That's just what it was. I think it's at the point he's obviously suspended for the rest of the season. But in order to get back in the league, if it's my vote and I'm the commissioner, you have to absolutely have to go to anger management counseling for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
I want reports back of how your conduct is going and your progress is going in those anger management reports. And then I don't think it's out of line to tell him and request from him and work with the Players Association to get him a psych eval, because something snapped with this guy. This is just the pinnacle of what's happened all year. He's the most penalized defensive player in the NFL, and I don't think that that's a freak thing. He reminds me of Ndamukong Suh, all kinds of talent, but, he'll step on your throat, gouge your eyes out, bite you, kick you in the head. He'll do crazy stuff like this. And only being driven by wanting the best for Myles Garrett as a human being, I would say I want this guy checked out and maybe get a psych eval done on him and see what's making this guy tick. But what do you think? Is that going too far, or is that reasonable?
Well, I think when it comes down to the NFL, we're looking at especially defensive players, offensive linemen, all of them have some issues, really, when you sit down and you think about it. You go back, you look at issues like guys like Richie Incognito.
Right.
You go back, you go back and listen to oh my gosh, what's the guy? Bill Romanowski. Yeah, right. So you go back, you look at some of those stories and some of the things these guys actually talk about.
Oh, they're hardwired differently.
Exactly. So when it comes down to psych evaluations, just about all of them, if you play defense or offensive lineman, because you're taking shots to the head or whatnot, all of them eventually needs a psych evaluation somewhere down the line. But the whole situation with Myles Garrett, that was horrendous.
Embarrassing.
It was more than embarrassing. It was horrendous. It was dangerous, and you could have killed that guy.
Right. I was just going to ask you. So is it going too far to say that he could have killed him? Because he could have killed him.
Yes.
Those helmets are made out of the same shields these days as the space shuttle tiles.
Right.
And you saw how hard he swung that thing.
Yes.
This is no longer a personal foul issue. It's not a football issue. It's not a game status issue.
No.
This is one human being possibly severely damaging, if not ending the life of another human being.
Right.
It was just so crazy. It was the grossest thing I think I've seen on the NFL field in a long time.
Yeah. So
it goes beyond Ndamukong Suh kicking Aaron Rodgers in the head and stepping on his throat.
Right.
It's in that vein, but it was so much more violently demonstrated.
Right.
It's the grossest thing I've seen.
It's the grossest thing I've seen, and I was so happy to see just how fast the Troy Vincent and Derek Brooks and those guys took action on that whole situation. First off, when you look at the NFL, those locker rooms, even other teams, they still consider themselves brothers.
Right.
And it's like, in a sense, you had a whole Cain versus Abel situation in the way that he tried to kill him with that helmet.
Completely defensive player.
Exactly.
Mason Rudolph wasn't wearing his helmet because he was getting struck with it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't want to get into this too much other than just giving our opinions on it. I think that a psych eval needs to be a part of his rehabilitation process back into the league if he's coming back into the league. And that's a pretty serious thing. That's a 3-month thing to go through a psych eval. But you got to any steps necessary to avoid this type of stuff. And is it too far to say if he could do this on the field, he might do it in public? So we want to keep the public safe? Is that going too far? Just because he snapped on the football field doesn't mean that those anger issues are confined to the football arena only, are they?
I really can't make that distinction simply because I don't know how he is in his personal life outside of football.
Mm-hmm.
People, you hear some players say, once we step out of football,
you flick a switch.
The lights, the switch is flipped.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm out of this vein, or I'm out of this arena, so now I'm back home, just kind of laid back.
And they can relax. Make that transition.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, I hope he can make that transition. And like we were talking about with Colin Kaepernick, I only want the best for Myles Garrett as a human being. But, that kind of behavior cannot go unchecked. Other things going on in the NFL, we've got some big games. One that I'm obviously interested in, New England going on the road to a Philadelphia team that started out very shaky but has now seemed to have gotten its bearings. And, some people in the NFL circles are starting to be a little more concerned with the Patriots than I think they should be. They are 8-1. They are the defending champions. They did lose on the road with a lot of injuries to a team that's very good. So I'm not really hitting the panic button too hard. They're giving 4 points on the road to Philly today. I'm not sure how this one shakes out. Obviously, I'd like the Patriots to win, but I think that this is just going to be a solid game. It's also going to be a barometer to see have the Philadelphia Eagles shaken off whatever cobwebs were going on from the beginning of the season. And we know they don't have Deshaun Jackson, right. So they're missing a deep threat, a wide threat, a guy who can do it in space, right. And is an athlete, right. And will take more than what the defense gives him. But how do you see this game shaking out? Because I could see it going either way, very close, but I can't see a blowout on either side.
Well, my friends, if I'm you, I'm taking the Patriots simply because Tom Brady is 43-18 against the spread after a loss.
Whoa!
So you might want to go
the
with
man
the
who never brings out stats pulls out a 43-18 against the spread.
So
all right, Chris.
So, if it was me, I would take Tom Brady and the
Mr.
Patriots
Analytics.
today. Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, so how is Bill Belichick when he has a week off to prepare? What's the analytics on that one?
The world's most dangerous man.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, so you just gave me a little more confidence.
Yes.
But I think that's going to be a lights-out game. Houston and Baltimore, I think, equally interesting, equally lights out. Obviously, the whole story is Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. They're dynamic two-way quarterbacks. Is the story anywhere else in this game besides that? Like how they perform is going to, determine what goes on?
Pretty much. That's that's the storyline for this game.
Very equally matched teams in every way. Yeah.
Right. Right. You have, Lamar Jackson working on his NFL MVP campaign. You have Deshaun Jackson, who's had a fairly decent year. So, yeah, that's the storyline.
I'll take Houston plus the 4.5.
Really?
Yeah, even though it's a road game. I mean, if it's two evenly matched teams, I'll take the points. 4.5 is quite a bit. 49ers get their first loss of the season, which I predicted last week against Seattle. I took Seattle plus the points. They covered by winning. I don't think it's too much of a setback. Seattle's 7-2. They're a solid team. And this is a bounce-back game for the 49ers at home against the Cardinals, who have played better than what we thought they might play. Right. Kyler Murray is coming around. The Fire Cliff Kingsbury talk has kind of settled down a little bit. 9.5 points is a lot, though. Yeah. 9.5 points is a lot, but you know what? I'll lay the 9.5 points, and I'll take the 49ers minus 9.5 at home.
I can see that now. You're starting to see Jimmy Garoppolo actually growing to himself with this offense.
Oh, you can't talk about I can't get into why we let him go. That was so stupid. I'm starting to find more flaws with Tom Brady because he's the one that put the kibosh on keeping him there in the first place.
Yeah, so I mean, so you start to see Jimmy Garoppolo grow into this offense, and this offense actually start to move with this defense. I don't see a problem with it. I would take the 9 as well.
What has happened in the last year to two teams that were in the playoffs last year, and we've talked about this 9 million times, that NFL myopic fan guy sitting in Buffalo Wild Wings drinking his beer gets so caught up in his team just lost the Super Bowl, but they'll be back next year and win it. And how many times? I think 50% of the time, one of the teams that plays in the Super Bowl doesn't even make the playoffs the next year.
Right.
That's what we're talking about here. The Rams are 5-4, given 6 at home against the Bears, who are 4-5. Not a lot of hope of making the playoffs. Play in a tough division. Don't have a quarterback. And people are starting to question Nagy, the head coach. What's happened to these two teams?
Well,
especially the Bears. Because the Rams, we could say, look, their defense has not stepped up. The offense, Todd Gurley, I don't even know. He went from like $86 million man, MVP, best running back in the league, to like a marginal C-plus running back that they're not using the right way most of the time. Their secondary's bad. We can look at the Rams and break it down and say their linebackers aren't very fast. The D-line isn't playing up to expectations, or at least as good as they played last year. On and on and on. Everything stands out on the eye test with the Rams. The Bears, I look at and I go, Mitchell Trubisky is terrible, but he was terrible last year. So why are they 4-5 now? The division got better?
Really, you think about it. I mean, you have Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay.
Right.
You have now the emergence of Minnesota, where Kirk Cousins is actually playing decent, and then they actually have a great running game with Dalvin Cook.
Right.
So that team got better.
But to be 4-5 and they don't have a real shot of making the playoffs at this point. And last year they were a playoff team and a field goal away from advancing to the second round. And now they just look like a tire fire.
Well, what happened is now that you really see who the Bears really are as far as a team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I said, when you look at those teams, when you have Green Bay who's gotten better, you have Minnesota who's gotten better, you have Detroit. They're
very highly questionable. Detroit.
Yeah.
I think Matt Patricia still might be the answer, but Matthew Stafford isn't, and they need to get some weapons around him. But go ahead with your thought.
So I mean, so you have those teams that are semi decent who has some resemblance. Well, you have two teams that have decent quarterback play. You have one that has a okay quarterback play, even though I think he's overpaid in Matt Stafford. But it's like the Bears is like you have pieces, but you don't have the complete piece to actually put the puzzle together. And I think that's where they are right now.
I think the piece that's missing, obviously, we could start at quarterback. Mitchell Trubisky's only thrown 8 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, he's only thrown 3 interceptions, which is correct, and he's been sacked 22 times on the season. But there's just something there about it that it's just not striking me right. And like I have said to you a million times when we talk about building a team, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the coach and I'm going to look at the quarterback. When I look at the quarterback, do I look at Kirk Cousins and say, this guy can win me a Super Bowl? I have a marginal amount of confidence that I could see that happening. And you could too. You could see it happening.
Yeah.
I look at Mitchell Trubisky and I go, can he win me a Super Bowl?
Can he win me a game?
There you go. I look at Jameis Winston and I go, can I see Jameis Winston on a Super Bowl field? All right, you're giving me the answer right there.
Exactly.
So I look at Mitchell Trubisky and I go, his longest pass of the season has been 53 yards, and that was a 15-yard pass that had 20 yards after catch afterwards.
Right.
He can't go down the field. He can't stretch the field. They don't have deep threats anyways. I think it's him, and it's not too early to start thinking, okay, maybe we've got to move on from Mitchell Trubisky and chalk this up as a give our draft picks away to move up to number 2 to get Mitchell Trubisky, who's only played 1 game in college and doesn't have a lot of experience, and maybe we're getting caught up in the hype and we should have pumped the brakes, so let's go out and get who? Cam Newton? I don't think that's the answer.
No.
That's making a horizontal move. You're getting a very talented guy, but he's got more tread missing off of the tire. So they've got to move on to somebody. I don't know who that is at that point, but you got to send a search committee out.
I mean, Colin Kaepernick sounds pretty good there, fellas.
You know what?
Strong arm.
What's wrong with that?
Exactly. He has a strong arm. He's a mobile quarterback.
Bring Colin Kaepernick. That's, you know what? That's a great, because we were talking about Cincinnati and the other bottom dwellers in the league. And, I mentioned Cincinnati. I thought he'd be a good fit in San Diego. Rivers is on the wrong side of 33 at this point. I think that would be a boost. And I don't have a problem bringing in Colin Kaepernick in a situation like that and saying, hey, let's just get you some time and get you back into it slowly.
Right.
I would feel completely confident benching Mitchell Trubisky and starting Colin Kaepernick for the rest of the season. Because what are you going to lose? If he's not going to have a confidence fall off if they lose the rest of their games.
No.
The only thing is that they don't have a lot working around him. It's not like they have Tariq Cohen as a good running back, but they don't have a deep threat at wide receiver. I would feel confident throwing him in there for the rest of the season. But is that going to happen?
It's not going to happen. But, to that point, you got to think, when Colin was in San Francisco, he didn't have any deep threats then. He threw 16 touchdowns. So
right, and that dual threat thing, he's more of a dual threat than Trubisky. I have more confidence in Colin Kaepernick than Trubisky. Man, I hope he lands somewhere. I really do. I really hope he lands somewhere. I like Colin Kaepernick for all of the controversy and stuff. That's all I'm going to say. NBA news, Paul George comes back, 20 minutes, 37 points. Clips get it done against a sad Atlanta team. I thought they would be better this year, 150-101. Clippers seem like one of the best teams, and even though they don't have the best record in the West, they're behind the Lakers right now. I'm not too concerned about it because everything with the NBA counts in May.
Right.
I start getting concerned in May, and it's almost unwatchable until then.
Yeah, at least after the All-Star game is when it starts to, the teams start to get a little bit more competitive, and everybody start jockeying for position right after the All-Star game. So but right now when I'm looking at the Clippers, you have Kawhi at one point who was considered like a MVP candidate, But again, this whole load management thing that he has going on with the Clippers, I don't see it. I mean, but whenever he does play against the marquee teams, like when he played against the Lakers, I mean, this guy is awesome, man. He shows up.
How about James Harden last night scoring 49 points, which normally we would look at that at SportsCenter and go, wow, 49 points. That's great, but you took 41 shots to get 49 points.
Hey, man, that's that Mamba mentality, man.
You know, Houston's in the top 5 teams in the West right now, but I don't know if it's for real or not, because I think they're going to run into cohesion issues, and I don't even know if there's enough ammunition in the gun, even with Westbrook being there this season, I think there's too much talent in the West, and I don't know, something about me chemistry-wise and Westbrook and Harden-wise, and maybe not playing enough defense-wise, and I'm not a fan of their coach, and I know you're not either, that I don't see them passing the eye test, making it to the Western Conference Finals. Do you?
No, I see them as a first, second round exit, to be honest with you. You know, when you had those guys playing together, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, you had the glue that held that team together, which was Kevin Durant. You don't have that person who can hold that team together. Even though, yes, it's James Harden's team. Yes, James Harden MVP or whatnot. Westbrook is an MVP. But they don't have that glue, that one person that
chemistry and cohesion
that makes this team gel together.
Yeah.
And I don't see them getting it done.
I don't either. I don't know about a first-round knockout where it's way early in the season to be talking about that. I think I could see them going second round. How about the Celtics? They lose their season opener, and it's a mild disappointment. But now they're on a 10-0 rip. They have the best record in the NBA. And the Knicks, Pelicans, Warriors, and Wizards combined don't have 10 wins. So hats off to the Celtics and whatever they're doing right. I thought it was addition by subtraction, getting rid of getting Kemba Walker and getting rid of Kyrie. I think that was like a plus move. I'm all about team and chemistry, and Kyrie's not about either of those, even though he's a talented guy, and Kemba Walker is. He's not going to be causing a lot of issues. But the Pelicans, didn't we expect more from them? Didn't we expect more from the Washington Wizards than 3 wins? And the Warriors, they have 2 wins right now, and I know it's Durant is gone, Clay is out, Steph hasn't been playing, Looney is hurt. And you have 2 wins, and now you have Russell.
To that list, so.
He's out for 2 weeks with a hand injury. And the Knicks, you know, the Knicks are what we expect them to be every single year. And their management comes out this week and says, you know, we're not playing to where we expected them to play. Where did you expect them to be? Where did you expect the Knicks to be at this point? They're not going to win anything. They're going to be, you know, they're going to need a flashlight, or what were those lights that they used in World War II that they shot up in the searchlights to find the airplanes? Yeah. They could have one of those and still not be able to see anything in the basement because it's that dark down there. That's how dark it is in the basement that the Knicks are in.
Yeah, it's sad simply because the Knicks were a marquee franchise at one point, and it's until
when was this? I mean, you got to go back to the Pat Riley years. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, at one point, you know, when you had Ewing, Starks,
Houston.
Yeah. Right? You had those guys. I mean, they
Oakley.
were. Yeah, so
that was like 95, though, dude.
At one point, I mean, they were there. They were.
Yeah, I'm just asking, like, how far do we have to go back?
And then, I mean, you had the Melo situation. You had the Melo era,
right?
Where they started.
And I thought they were going in the right direction because you have Phil Jackson as a GM who knows what he's talking about. And you had Melo, who was still effective offensively and was a fairly good player. You brought in Kristaps Porzingis, who everybody went ballistic when you drafted, and as it turned out to be, he's a really great player.
Right.
And you were going in the right direction. But then Dolan steps in, and you kick Oakley out of the Madison Square Garden for absolutely no reason. You give Melo a big, huge contract and then dump him 2 years later. You get rid of your GM and Phil Jackson, who's one of the brightest guys ever in the NBA. And now you're left with what? I mean, nothing. You've got R.J. Barrett as a freshman player in the league, and what are you building around? Nothing. There's nothing there. Well, absolutely no hope.
Well, the Knicks are going to be one of those teams that's going to be a
bottom dweller,
lifelong project, and you know, hopefully they're able to get some pieces around R.J. Barrett because the guy seems to have a bright future if he had some pieces around him. So when I look at the whole situation with Phil Jackson that situation just to me it didn't match. It really didn't make any sense to me because Phil Jackson he's a LA guy. He's not a New York guy.
I think he could have fixed him. I think they were on the road to getting fixed. They were getting better.
I don't know, Ron. I mean, when I look back at that Phil Jackson era, I look at the best thing he did was draft Porzingis.
Right, but he wasn't allowed to have total freedom and anonymity that you need as a GM. You got to put people in a position where they're qualified and let them do their job. That's why Dallas will never win, because Jerry Jones doesn't let people do their job, and Jason Garrett's a bad coach. I mean, look at all the talent they have, right?
Yeah,
and they're still not winning.
Yeah, but I mean, there were stuff that was coming out there where Phil Jackson only wanted to work part of the seasons, and as a GM,
you got to be all hands on deck.
You have to be all hands on deck. You have to be in. So it's a lot of stuff that went into that whole situation with Phil Jackson. To me, you can't discount what Phil Jackson brings, his knowledge that he brings to the game. You can't discount that. Simply just look at what he did to win championships or whatnot.
Yeah. So how do you manage Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, then John Paxson, and Rodman? I mean, you want to talk about 4 or 5 completely different personalities. The coach's job is to be a manager.
Right.
It's not necessarily drawing up X's and O's. It's a lot about being a manager. And when the NBA today, you got huge, big, different personalities, and he was able to bring all those guys together.
Right.
That's the genius of Phil Jackson, and he deserves full credit on that. What else is going on in the world of sports piquing your interest, Chris?
Well, we have Carmelo, who finally got signed by Portland Trailblazers this week. It was basically a non-guaranteed contract. Basically, Portland has no liability. Melo has no liability, so basically it motivates Melo to actually play ball, play within the system of Portland, which is
Who's terrible right now.
Who's terrible right now? But
so we're gonna get 15 to 18 points, 4 to 5 rebounds, maybe a steal, and is that the most we can expect from him at this point?
I mean, last year he only averaged 13 points a game, so just that to come off the bench is a decent spark. I think will help them down the road as they have a veteran that's coming off the bench to help them maybe in that playoff run. And then the next story is Mark Cuban is actually loving the whole load management thing.
That's because he's an idiot.
Well,
NBA-wise, he's a dummy. Money-wise, he's a smart guy.
Well, I mean, Mark Cuban said this is something that he thought that would be something that the NBA could have used back in the 80s and 90s when these guys are playing 80 and 90 games, basically to help preserve their star players going into the playoff stretch run.
I think the best basketball that I've seen in my lifetime was in the 80s and the 90s. And today, it's just come down, three-pointer, slam dunk, that's it. Speaking of that's it, that music can mean only one thing. It's time to thank our support staff. The man on the board, Ray Boom Boom Mancini, my co-host, Chris Roberts, doing it for me again this weekend. For all of us here at the First Round in the St. Jude Studios, do us a favor, smash that subscription button, give us a like, tell your friends about the First Round, and help us grow to epic proportions. We'll be back here Wednesday night live with another entertaining show for you here in the First Round. Have a great NFL rest of your weekend. The holidays are coming up. It's going to be awesome. We'll see you on Wednesday night. Until then, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.